grills in my mouth double as a freeze. The grills in my mouth double as a freeze. The grills in my mouth double as a freeze. The grills in my mouth double as a.
All right, guys. So we're here. Our first guest, first episode, Jimmy Smith, former Bellator commentator. He's MMA analyst. You can see him everywhere. Jimmy, how's it going today, man?
Going well, man. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. This is huge. So we'll start off with just tell everyone about your background and you have a little bit of a MMA record too, eh?
I do, man. That's how this whole adventure started. I was 6-1 as a pro, and then I had just done my last fight. I had submitted a guy named Jason Chambers, and I got a call from one of my teammates and said there's a show on the Discovery Channel. They're looking for somebody to go around the world and do different martial arts. And I went, yeah, sure, I'll try that. And I called the producer and did a phone interview, and then we did an audition at my gym, actually. And I got it, and I ended up doing the show called Fight Quest for Discovery Channel, where I went around and did all these different martial arts in different countries. Did that for about a year. And then when I was finished, I was actually still doing it, actually. And somebody called me, and it was the VP over at Pride. And he said, hey, we're starting this thing called M1, and we're going to be doing kind of shows all over the world, but it's going to be aired in the U.S. How do you feel about doing color commentary in Amsterdam next Wednesday? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And I went, did it, worked for them for a couple years. And then a bunch of the people I worked with over at M1 ended up going to Bellator. When Bellator started, they needed a color commentator. I ended up going over there. And that's where I was for 8 years. And then I was at the UFC for a year. And now it's SiriusXM and ESPN pay my bills right now. Yeah.
Crazy.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome, man.
crazy.
Yeah, I remember hearing you on Bellator. I was at 7 years ago. I'm from Ontario, Canada, and 7 years ago, up north in Ontario, there's a Bellator show, and Chandler was fighting, and it's just not to get too far ahead, but it's just crazy. Like, you've had a crazy journey. You have a little bit of taste of each were you Invicta for a little bit?
I've done Invicta, yeah. I've done Invicta. I've done PBC boxing on Spike, so I call boxing for them. And there's some interesting stuff coming up that I can't talk about yet, but it's another shift in my freaking career. So awesome. Stuff like that just happens, man. I get ready to hit the ball whenever it comes to you, pretty much in the broadcasting world.
That's amazing, especially for me. When people used to mention Bellator, you was definitely one of the faces there for me, for one of the commentators, because I think you're one of the better commentators when it comes to MMA, because you have a lot of knowledge, and it surprises me because you had an amazing record with so many finishes. Do you ever feel like you wanted to get back into MMA, like competing?
I've talked to so many guys who had careers. I don't know if you guys are up on what happened to Spencer Fisher, who was a UFC fighter who has CTE now, and he doesn't have any memory, and he's all messed up.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, there are fighters out there who had careers way beyond anything I did. They're way more successful and held titles and all that stuff, who are broke and messed up and don't have anything. And also when I left MMA, which is 2006, my last fight I got paid like $1,200. Mm-hmm. So you just couldn't make any money doing it. It wasn't seen as like a long-term path. It was kind of like something you did for a while, and then you had to do something else eventually. And so when my something else came earlier, I took it. So I don't have any regrets about what I could have been or where I could have. I'm not one of those guys like the older I get, the better I was. I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
No. The idea that I would have been UFC champ if I had stuck with it, I don't know. So I don't look back with any regret on that. It was great, prepared me for all this stuff. But when I had the chance to do something else in my life that had a little more long-term stability, I took it.
Yeah, of course.
Amazing. And talking about commentary, I want to talk to you about something that's been very controversial. I think it's a topic that's been talked about for many years, but I think recently, since the Israel Adesanya versus John, I don't know if you saw the backlash it had because of the commentary, because it was too biased. So the question I want to ask you is, you've been a commentator for so many years, how hard is it to not be biased with a fighter that that you consider him a friend, and be neutral. Because to be honest, when I was watching that fight, and I don't want to say nothing wrong about Joe Rogan because I love Joe Rogan and I love DC, but they were so biased in that fight, and it was irritating, and it's getting so much backlash. So I'd like to hear your opinion.
It's something you always have to work on, right? I mean, it's something where, like, what's a good example? Like Georgie Karhanen, who fought in Bellator. He's from Southern California. I know Georgie and his team really well. I've coached against him and all this stuff. I really like Georgie. When he's losing, I gotta say he's losing. When like, I might not like it, but I don't have a choice, So, and you have to be willing to say, like, dude, I love Georgie, but he's getting killed. Like, oh my, Georgie's a boy, and oh my God, it's not good. And you have to be willing and able to say that. If you're not, you're doing a disservice to everybody. You're doing a disservice to kind of all the fans and the whole team. The problem is a lot of times, and I've been in 3-man booths every now and then, but not that often. When one does it and the other one starts doing it the same way without thinking, like, you tend to be like, it's just the way people are hardwired. They tend to agree with whoever's next to them. And so when, like, they're both doing it, it's a big problem. And a good producer will jump in and go, hey, what about the other guy? Or, like,
definitely,
they're in your ear and they go, hey,
Do you think maybe it's because it's Do you think maybe because it was Joe Rogan and DC, they don't say nothing to them, maybe because of that?
Yeah, of course not. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say. I'm not gonna tell DC what to say, right? And I'm not saying they should tell them what to say, but a good producer will go, like, or I've had it pointed out to me, like if I think a fighter's winning a fight, right, and they're keeping stats at the time when I was in Bellator, sometimes you get punch stats, whatever, and my producer would go, you're saying so and so's winning, but he's losing the punch stats. Explain yourself. He'll say, look, okay, I'm not saying you're wrong, but how to explain your logic behind what you're saying. But look, when he's hitting him, he's really hurting him. This other guy's throwing right hands, they're landing, but God, when he throws them, knocks him halfway across the ring, and my producer would go, all right, good job. You know what I mean? Like, right. It looks to me like Israel Adesanya's losing. So why are we seeing different? Even if I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm saying explain yourself. And there's less of that in the UFC. In the UFC, they hardly ever tell the commentators anything.
Oh, really? That's crazy.
Yeah. My producers with me at Bellator were much more vocal about, like I said, like, if I see somebody winning the fight and my producer thinks somebody else is winning, he might say, all right, explain. All right, what am I seeing that you're not seeing? And I will on here explain what he's not seeing.
That's like,
it doesn't work that way in the UFC very often.
That's kind of like a form of constructive criticism, right? I'd figure, right? Because, like, if your producers go, no, it's not true, then that kind of throws you off as a commentator when you're doing your job, right? That makes a lot of sense. So just to switch topics really quick, we don't have that much of a good segue for this, but what do you think? So, Khabib just retired, according to Dana White, but he retired 3 months ago. But they made it official that he's retiring, and a lot of people are upset. Like, a lot of people would like to see him come back one more time. A lot of people, think, what, he's done. His mother didn't want to fight anymore after his father passed. What do you think about his retirement? Like, would you have liked to see him come back to do one more, like, against GSP or against McGregor one more time? Like, or do you think, retired, he's done?
McGregor never.
I'm sorry.
sorry. I was just saying McGregor never.
McGregor again. Back from McGregor ever.
Oh.
The thing I say is, when someone's heart's not in it, it's over, right? When someone's heart isn't in it, they can have all the money in the world, they can have all the titles in the world, they can have any inducement, and if their heart's not in it, they might come back, but they're not going to be the same guy. And I think all those motivations were gone from Khabib. He just didn't. He didn't need the money. He had already proven himself as far as he was concerned. He had already won the title. He had already defended it 3 times. That was it. And I think Justin Gaethje probably stylistically was the toughest matchup for him, and he wiped him out. So he just didn't really have any reason to go on. And once someone's reached that point, that's it. I mean, there's nothing else you can tell them, really, other than
money. Money talks too.
Money talks, but in Dagestan, the dude's rich. Dude's rich by our standards, let alone in Dagestan, where I'm sure he's
that's true, man.
Life, right?
And he's a different human being. Like, he's religious. He's got morals. I don't think money would be too hard to convince him to come back.
Yeah, and what do you want? Like, do you want? Well, let's flip this around, guys. How old are you?
I'm 19.
All right, how old are you?
I'm 23.
Okay. Do you want a girl to date you because you have money or because she likes you?
Yeah, because
You don't get
like
the same performance out of it if it's just money. Trust me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Same thing. Like if Khabib came back just for the money, okay, a lot of guys are sleepwalking. Like in when I was in Bellator, I saw guys like Ken Shamrock coming back who needed the money and stuff like that. Like, dude, you got horrible performances out of these guys. They're just not, they're not in it anymore. They're not mentally in it. They're not physically in it. They don't have it anymore. And rather than see that, I'd rather Khabib retire all day.
And where would you rank Khabib among GOAT status? Like when we're talking John Jones, DC, GSP. Number two?
Number two. The reason he's number two, well, because like the four guys that are the greatest of all time, in my opinion, John Jones, GSP, Anderson Silva, Khabib. Those are my top four.
Yeah.
The reason I put him ahead of GSP is GSP's the only guy on that list to lose decisively in their prime. He was in his prime, and Matt Serra knocked him out, and he tapped his strikes. He was the only one. Anderson Silva just kept going so long. He kept losing and losing and losing. I think at a certain point that affects your status, right? Like, Jesus Christ, you never lose your last 6 or 7 fights, however many it was. And then I think John Jones, though, is my number one, despite his PED issues and everything. But in the octagon, John Jones was absolutely incredible. The only thing that hurts Khabib's all-time status is he's the only guy on that list who never, like, cleared out the division. There are still guys who are at the top of 55 that he didn't fight because they started earlier back in the day as champions. So, he only had 3 title defenses. A lot of these guys had 6, 7, 8 title defenses, right? And he didn't. So that's the only thing that hurt him on that list, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good argument, against Khabib. Some other ones would be like, the title defenses. And also, like, you look at fights arguably 1 to 20 of his career, and they're not in like against top competition. They're more like not in UFC, basically, right? But you look at a John Jones and, a lot of John Jones great, like, his fights in his career in his prime, even before his prime a little bit, were in the UFC. I'm Canadian, so I got a little bit of hometown bias. I have GSP at 1. But, there's arguments to that, right? You look at the competition he fought. Would it stack up against the competition now? But I think, in 10 years, we'll be talking about a new guy. You'll be like, oh, well, how's his competition stacked up against John Jones, right? So it's all relative to what era you're into.
Here's one thing you always have to keep in mind. Whenever you're judging a fighter, you have to judge them against the talent that existed when they fought. You can't, can't say who they fought in a fucking time machine. It doesn't work that way, right? So, you have to judge them against the talent that was available right then. So it's about streaks, it's about names, it's about finishes, right? So how many did you beat? Who were they, and how'd you beat them? Okay?
Right.
And that's always the criteria I look at. Always, every single time. And also, one thing that really changes things about how you see different eras. And as you said, when did they start in the UFC and how many did they have? Do you know how many fights Anderson Silva had before he fought for a title in the UFC?
Oh, yeah, like a bunch. Yeah.
In the UFC, do you know how many he had?
I'm going to go with 14.
No, before he fought for a title, how many fights did he have in the UFC? Before he fought for the title.
Like 10? Wasn't it like 10, something like that?
1.
Wow.
He knocked out Chris Lieben and then fought Rich Franklin for the title. That's how it worked back then. GSP had 2 before he fought Matt Hughes the first time. Yeah. Back then it was like, all right, you win 1 or 2, you get in a title shot. Now it's like guys win 6, 7, 8 in a row. You don't even know who they are, right?
No,
like,
I think now you need to have clout.
Started earlier.
Sorry.
No, Anderson Silva knocked out Chris Lieben, then fought for a title. GSP beat Carl Parisian and then I want to say Jay Haran, and then fought Matt Hughes for the title the first time. Guys just started younger. They started earlier. You join the UFC. Some guys got UFC fights. Title fights. Their first fight in the UFC. But that was a long time ago. And so guys just start later. GSP and Khabib had just totally different trajectories. Khabib got his title much later, only defended 3 times. By the time he defended 3 times, he was a lot older than GSP. So you don't get necessarily the wiping out of generations that you get with older guys, Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Well, I'm here thinking, how are we talking about GOATs and we're not mentioning Henry Cejudo, the real GOAT?
He's a great fighter, man. He really is, and he's not bad in person. It's kind of funny. Like when you actually meet him, he's not as cringy as he is with his whole shtick. And dude, it worked for him, right? King of cringe. Yeah. The one at the end of his career was absolutely incredible. It's incredible. Beat DJ, beat TJ, beat Marlon Moraes, and beat Dominic Cruz. I mean, those 4 period will put you right near the top. Like those are amazing fighters.
Yeah.
And people don't like him, but hell, he keeps winning. What are you gonna do about it, right?
Yeah, hopefully he comes back and Hopefully he comes back and fights Sterling.
We'll
But
see. We'll see, because I think he's definitely coming back. It's just a matter of 35 or 45. He says he wants Max Holloway. He has some. Okay, fine. He has some ideas about who he wants to fight.
yeah, he's got options. That's the good thing. But what I really want to ask you is the fight coming up. I think it's in May. Charles Oliveira versus Chandler. Since you've seen Chandler for so many years, how do you think he matches up against?
That's your boy.
Yeah, man. I like Chandler a lot, dude. Good dude. Super powerful. Here's the deal. If I'm coaching Charles Oliveira, I literally look him in the eye and I say, I don't care if it's a 10-7 round. If you get out of round 1, you can win this fight.
Okay.
If you survive round 1 against Michael Chandler, you can win this fight.
That's a big if.
Right. I don't care if he beats you so bad, your eyes are swollen. I don't care. If you can see at the end of round 1, you can walk back to the corner, we can win this fight. So the problem is Michael is incredibly explosive. He's an amazing athlete. He's naturally super duper powerful. He's aggressive, but he cannot pace himself at all. Like he's really terrible at pacing himself.
Okay.
One time I remember interviewing him, or it was after a fight. I think it was a Benson Henderson fight where he won the first 3 rounds and then just like went off a cliff. And Henderson was kicking his ass in round 5. And we're like, oh my God, he's going to lose. And he managed to hang on. He won. I think it was a split decision. So I interview him. I do his pre-fight meeting for his next fight. And he was like, hey, man, you said I can't pace myself. He goes, the deal is I just set such an incredibly high pace early in a fight that, like it's impossible to keep up. And I go, yeah, that's what that means.
That's
like
the
the definition of pacing. You throw 100 punches in round 1, you throw 50 in round 2. By round 3, you're throwing 1 punch. That's bad pacing. You have a ton of energy. You just spend it all early. And so, with the Dan Hooker fight, I picked Hooker to win, but I said, look, if Chandler wins, it's going to be knocks him out in the first round. And what happened? Knocked him out in the first round.
Out cold.
Out cold. And dude, he has the power to do that to anyone. So if you're Oliveira, I don't care if the crowd is booing and throwing trash into the freaking octagon. You stick and move, survive round 1. Try and make it a ground game. Pull guard. Do whatever you have to do. Get out of the first round with Michael Chandler, and your odds of winning go up by a factor of 10. That's what I would tell him.
Yeah, that's real. Like, yeah, I agree with that, right? Because, a lot of people are upset that Chandler got the fight. But it's like it seems just a lot of the term thrown around casuals that's being thrown around a lot. Like a lot of casuals are, you only won 1 fight in the UFC. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. You got to look back, to this Bellator days, but you also have to look at not only that, the other, like, who else does he have? Poirier's chasing money over titles. That's fine, whatever. And then you got Gaethje, and Gaethje doesn't really seem like he wants to fight Chandler right now, right? Gaethje doesn't really seem, and Gaethje, out of everyone who's had the worst, Khabib's beat everybody, but the way I look at it, like, to me, Gaethje performed the worst against Khabib. So,
there are 2 factors that make these 2 guys the title fight.
Right.
Number 1, you ready?
Yeah.
Haven't lost to Khabib.
Yeah. That's true.
Whoever else they had put the title on, if you're a promotion, you're the UFC or you're whomever, you don't want somebody walking off with your title. You don't like it, right?
No.
It sucks. The reason is if Gaethje beats Chandler, they put the belt on Gaethje's waist. What's it gonna say? Never beat Khabib. Khabib kicked your ass, bro.
That's true.
You are not the
DC John Jones thing. Same thing.
Right. DC was never considered a legitimate champion because John Jones kicked his ass. And until he kicks John Jones' ass, he'll always be number 2. And what the UFC did not want is the belt around the waist of somebody that the fans would go,
Yeah, literally.
Number 2 to Khabib. So when Chandler, let's say for argument's sake, Chandler wins the belt, Chandler can pick up that belt and go, come get me, Khabib. You never beat me. Now, will that lure Khabib back? No. But it's a nice storyline, right? I don't know. Maybe our guy beats Khabib. I don't know. Dana would be like, I don't know, man. Maybe Chandler gets him. You want to be able to move past the person that isn't there anymore, the person who isn't making you money anymore. You got to be able to move past that person. And until you do that, in the eyes of most people, they're still the champ.
Yeah. Do you think there's a level of pettiness with the UFC of having a former Bellator guy as their champion? Bellator guy beating all the UFC guys, or you don't think that exists anywhere?
Amongst fighters, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Amongst fighters, yeah. Dana White, yeah, if you'll make me money, great. I don't care if you're purple and come from a different planet. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Great, right? So I don't think that exists so much in terms of like the matchmaking in the UFC. I think it does exist among the fighters. Like, we stayed here and paid our dues. But the implication is that Chandler didn't pay his dues in Bellator. Not fighting Eddie Alvarez, right? Fighting Will Brooks, fighting these guys who were very, very tough. That he didn't, pay his dues there. Knock out Benson Henderson, right? That was his last fight in Bellator. Crushed Benson Henderson. So it's one of those things where UFC fighters tend to see dues paying as fighting in the UFC rather than fighting somewhere else. And I don't think that's particularly fair. He does have an excellent MMA career. And also, he started out taking on the number 5 guy in Dan Hooker and plastered his ass. So, he took on, like, if someone gives you an audition for something and you ace it, okay, well, dude, I didn't give him the audition. They did, right? Don't tell me I'm not ready. I just blasted the number 5 guy. No, Dustin Poirier, he didn't read. Dude, you went the distance with him. I creamed him. I don't want to hear how I'm not ready. That would be my line if I were Michael Chandler.
Yeah, and his promo was amazing. His promo was amazing after he knocked out Hooker. That was that was like some Rich Flair stuff.
Great stuff, man. He's ready to go, and he's got the style, he's got the look, he can talk.
Mm-hmm.
The UFC knows what they have, and if he beats Charles Oliveira, he's champion. But Charles Oliveira is Jesus. I haven't seen jiu-jitsu in MMA, and
I think Oliveira versus Khabib. If Khabib was to come back, it needs to be against Oliveira. I think that's the only guy that I personally say could give him a challenge, just because of the wrestling and the jiu-jitsu. Because I know Khabib, he doesn't care. Like, he showed it in Gaethje fight. He had no problem with Gaethje's power. Even though I know it hurt him, because he said he never got hit like that ever in his life. So I think he'll go with the same game plan against Oliveira, but that jiu-jitsu is crazy. I swear he's got the most submissions in UFC history.
Yep.
If I'm correct.
Yes, he does.
So I think
passing shouldn't be that easy. I was saying that, like, I was watching the 221st and I was like, dude, passing shouldn't be this easy. It shouldn't be this smooth.
Not at all.
It should not be. This is unbelievable. I couldn't believe how good it was. And that was a part that was kind of like blowing me away. Ferguson's got a hell of a ground game. He submitted plenty of guys too, and it was like his guard wasn't there. And only because he has really flexible arms did he ended up, not going to the hospital for that one.
Literally. And that was actually people's main point of making Khabib versus Ferguson, that his jiu-jitsu would help Ferguson against that Khabib fight. That was literally the argument that fans would make, and the way Oliveira just the way he just carried him, controlled him on the floor, it was incredible. And to be honest,
that armbar too, man. That armbar under my professor is a funny story. A week before that happened, I trained jiu-jitsu, and my professor was showing us a variation of the armbar, which is very similar to how Oliveira did it. I'm like, that's crazy. Like, it's just weird, right? Because like, you hear the commentators go, "Oh my God, I've never seen that before," but jiu-jitsu guys, like my professor, and I'm sure you do it. You train jiu-jitsu yourself, right. So like they know that type of stuff. But it's just weird, like the things you see in the UFC. It's like you see where it comes from in jiu-jitsu and the disciplines. You see like where that work pays off in situations like that.
But it's also a matter of it. I remember AJ McKee when he tapped out Darren Caldwell with that neck crank, and everyone's kind of losing their mind, calling it the McKeotine and stuff. I'm like, people do that all the time. It just doesn't usually work. Like, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, I know that transition. You just generally don't see it at a high level against another high level guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see these goofy chokes and stuff, and like, that'll never work in a million years.
Yeah.
And to watch somebody pull it off against another high level guy, that's the interesting thing. We usually see pretty basic jiu-jitsu in MMA because at a high level, they all know this stuff. And you're not going to get some wild, funky, crazy thing, most of the time.
No.
So when they pull it off, you're like, Jesus Christ, to do that in an MMA fight, we have so much to worry about. That's the crazy part. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, we all know these funky, stupid chokes and armbar transitions that, and we do them in the gym against our friends, but like, you don't see them in the finals of the world championships, right? But
exactly.
That's the thing about Charles Oliveira. It wasn't that he was doing anything I don't know how to do. It's just, it usually doesn't work against a guy like Tony Ferguson that easily, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Exactly.
Prediction. Last thing. Prediction. Who you got, Oliveira or Chandler in that fight?
I got to get closer to the fight. I do. I really do. I got to get closer.
Yeah.
To the fight.
Okay,
One
yeah,
of those
yeah.
things.
I let my picks. I wait until right before fight time because weird stuff happens where I'll pick a guy and they'll go on the scale and they'll look like dog shit. And I'll go, oh God, why did I do that? I always wait until the last possible minute. I have all available information. Then I make my pick. That one too far out. From this far out, if you gave me $1,000, God. Right now, I'll say I'm leaning Oliveira just because his stand-up ain't bad either. He doesn't have any obvious gap other than Mike is clearly the superior wrestler. The last thing on earth he's going to do is take him down. So I would say that Oliveira's jiu-jitsu advantage is bigger than Chandler's striking advantage. Although Chandler is the better striker, not by as much as Oliveira leads him on the ground. That's why.
Okay. Yeah.
There we go. We have it. Exclusive, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Giancarlo, you got any other questions? We've pretty much covered, a lot of things we want to talk about today.
Yeah.
Just thank you again, once again, Jimmy Smith, joining us today. Legendary commentator.
Oh, come on. You guys are too kind. I really appreciate it. Keep going with what you're doing, man. You learn young. And trust me, if I were doing what you were doing when I was your age, I'd be a much better broadcaster now. All right. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you so
thanks,
much.
Man.
Have a great day.